involves building on the reputation that we have, the recognition for our courses, our qualifications, and the recognition in the Canberra community and regional community for the institution. Thirdly, expanding our organisational capability. Our strong view is that there's whole new areas of expertise that are needed within an organisation such as ours to prepare it for the future. Fourthly, and I'll talk a bit more about this during the presentation, is establishing contemporary client services and facilities which we saw as integral to the growth of the Institute. And finally, pursuing industry, community and government partnerships. So let me just focus on two examples, if you like, of pursuing those above themes. The first that I wanted to focus on was looking at our campus facilities and the development of those facilities, with a particular emphasis on our Reid campus. Our Reid campus is the headquarter campus. For those that know Canberra, it's right adjacent to the CBD. It's got a fantastic location and one that we want to capitalise on. The things that we're doing on that campus, we've just completed a major master plan for that site, and the master plan essentially comes up with the concept of a sustainable urban village in a campus, or where the campus is embedded within that urban village. The development of a major student service hub in that campus, and the development of a learning centre, which I'll talk more about. Just a few slides to show what the campus currently looks like. The slide looking at, just explaining, it's a quad block, if you like, a major block of Reid. On the left-hand side is the central business district, or the city. There's a direct access which we propose to enhance, and then you'll see a relative garden setting with low-scale buildings, although in a number of places we propose to take buildings up to about 8 stories in height. On the bottom of the slide is direct access across the road to Lake Burley Griffin, and you'll see in more detailed diagrams it shows a lot of activity spaces and access points through the campus. It's an open campus to the public and heavily used, and one that we want to encourage to be used by the public. Just looking a little bit further, an integral part of the Reid campus is the central part of the campus, which has a central square, a grass square. Around that square are the student activity spaces. On the left-hand side at the bottom we have the Student Services Hub, where you can walk straight in off the street into a hub which we're currently developing and get a one-stop shop for students in terms of enrolments, any information about career development, recognition of prior learning and so on. There's a cafe. At the top on the left is a direct access into the Learning Centre. At the top there's a Student Service Association services. A new admin building is proposed on the right-hand side. And on the bottom side there, which is Constitution Avenue for those that know Canberra, we'll be looking at restaurant, cafe services that will be open not only to students but also to the public. But the key point there is the central part of that, the central square, and the way in which students can access services directly in one core area of the campus. I might move on then to the second example I wanted to use in terms of developing those themes, and was the project that we've been doing, which is called CIT Online. Essentially, this has involved a consultancy through Deloitte's, the Eclipse area of Deloitte's, have just completed an analysis looking at our technology use and opportunities for technology advancement. What are some of the key technology issues we're facing? And developing for us an online strategy and roadmap. Just a couple of observations. Whilst we have very good systems currently, one of the major problems that we have is that our core systems, our library management system, online learning environment system that we have, our student information management system, aren't fully integrated. And so, for example, we don't have single sign-on or centralised ID management. We don't have a central portal or online enrolment, and there are certainly other advances that we need to make in terms of the use and access to web technologies, online learning environment and learning object repository, and I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the presentation. Now moving on to marketing and branding. Whilst I mentioned before that the institution has a rich history, we had a bit of a feeling that perhaps, whilst that is both a strength, it can also represent, to some extent, a difficulty for the organisation. Is it an organisation that's starting to get a little bit stale? Is the branding of the organisation, yes, rich in history, but is it seen as an organisation for the future? So we outsourced some work, and I would like to acknowledge Marketing Angels that we had a number of discussions with and presented, involved them in some of the presentation of this material. The diagram up there, we undertook, or our consultants did, research with individual clients, industry clients, surveys, focus groups, a number of ways of accessing information to see what were some of the things that students wanted in terms of their educational experience and study at the Canberra Institute of Technology. To some extent it surprised us. We thought a lot of the answers would have to do with issues around individual courses, issues around technologies and so forth. Whilst that came up, there was far more emphasis on things like a supportive environment, a welcoming environment, an easy environment, a relaxing environment. And one thing that came through very strongly was that even for students that were doing a proportion or much of their study online, they did want access to our campuses. They wanted to engage in activities on our campuses and use our campus spaces in a flexible, supportive way. So that told us a lot, both for mature age students and for youth. I won't go through some of the other aspects of that work, but I'd be happy to talk about it. Just reminding people about our student, or just discussing our student population. One of the things that's changed dramatically, and I think it's true of other TAFEs, is the diversity of the student population. We're no longer just, TAFEs aren't simply institutions where people come straight out of school and do an apprenticeship. Our students now traditionally are older. We do have young students, but we've got students right through all age groups. Most of them, as I indicated before, are working. A large proportion don't have English as their first language, and many of them are certainly looking for enhanced technical skills. A few slides just to show some of the issues around students, which I've mentioned. The other thing that we did in our survey work was to ask some questions around our branding. What did people think of our branding, our taglines that we used on our publications? What did they think about our publications? Should they be available online, physical publications? How did they access information about the Institute and so forth? One thing that came through very strongly was that our brand was strong, it was well recognised. Most of the people interviewed knew what CIT stood for. If you're from Canberra, they knew what, in general terms, what the Institute was about. They knew about our reputation, but as I mentioned before, there was some suggestion that perhaps it was an organisation that was very focused on its history and perhaps less focused on its future. So, the final section that I wanted to focus on today is to look a little and discuss a bit about library and information services at CIT with a learning centre concept. The CIT Learning Centre that we're developing, and when I say learning centre, I mean we've got one of those on each of our campuses, and I'll show you some details of that in a minute. We're looking at developing a learning centre which is essentially a learning commons for all students, with a strong emphasis on moving learning from being teacher-centred in traditional classroom settings to a learner-centred approach.